Here we are. All right. Hello everyone, and welcome to our presentation. Our group is composed of Ileana Serda, Young He, Andrew Little, Veronica Roman, and myself, Michelle Alvarez. And we are presenting on nursing advocacy. So the concept of advocacy, first of all, we need to define advocacy. So next slide. Advocacy is an advocate, someone who pleads the cause of another and supports a particular cause or a policy in the interest of others. In nursing, advocacy means preserving human dignity and promoting patient rights by supporting, again, protecting or speaking out for the benefit and well-being of individuals, families, communities, and populations. And although advocacy in nursing has been well established throughout history, it may take on different definitions at different levels. All right, so for nursing, how do hospitals and organizations define advocacy? Advocacy at the healthcare setting is probably most commonly witnessed at the workplace, such as hospitals, where vulnerable populations and the administrators have wellness and safety goals in common. A variety of healthcare professionals and patient advocates work together in order to promote a safe practice environment. Some hospitals support advocacy by hiring patient representatives who can support patients in a variety of ways. All right, next slide. Patient advocacy often arises from necessity to fight against inequalities, illnesses, conditions, or worries that make individuals feel scared, powerless, or vulnerable. For example, finding out a new diagnosis of cancer, not having insurance coverage or financial support after elevated medical bills, not getting answers to their questions or requests like treatments or tests, or just being heard. And so this results in the need to stand up for oneself and seek advocacy and support, which can represent hope and change. All right, nurses have described advocacy as a crucial aspect of the profession that integrates the important characteristics of expertise, experience, and leadership with the intent of communicating and educating, and it is these values and tools that ultimately integrate into the professional responsibility that nurses hope to uphold. And now Young He will present the next part.
Promoting advocacy. So for nurses, there's more to high quality care than just knowing the diseases. Nurses act as an important character as a patient advocates. So they can help, nurses can help patients make informed decisions regarding their health, including helping them navigate it through a complex medical system, translating medical terms, and helping patients make ethical decisions. Because we have the most direct interaction with patients, nurses are ideally positioned as advocates. So when nurses successfully advocate for their patient, their work promotes a healing process and a positive experience. So I found a video that shows some examples of nursing advocacy. Let's enjoy the video here. Okay, let's start.
Good.
Okay now?
During the Crimean War, more soldiers died from infection than in battle. Until a nurse introduced sanitary practices still in use today. When the scourge of polio hit the world, it was standard practice to strap down and immobilize patients. Until a nurse discovered that movement and physical therapy had far better results. In the 1950s, jaundice was a leading cause of infant death, until a nurse found that a few hours of sunlight could actually cure the condition. At the dawn of the AIDS epidemic, no one knew how the disease spread, so patients were kept quarantined and alone, until nurses defied convention and embraced them with compassion. disease was thought by many to be too contagious to treat, until a student nurse used what she had on hand, garbage bags and duct tape, to protect herself so she could care for others. And cerebral palsy robbed many patients of their ability to speak, until a nurse gave them back their voices. And I will always be grateful to her.
Okay, so there is some examples of how nurses advocate for the patients. So, to the next slide. So, some forms of nursing advocacy includes safeguarding, so protecting and the defenses are most needed when people are sick, vulnerable, and in need of help to enhance their safety. So keeping patients safe from the medical errors such as polypharmacies, wrong dosage, and the infusion rate is a really important thing for nurses to do. Protecting patients from incompetency and misconduct of co-workers and other members of health care team is another way of protecting patients. Communicating between patients, families, and healthcare professionals, being patients' voice to stand up and meet patients' preference. That's a great way, and that's what nurses do when they promoting advocacy. So speaking about ethic, nurses stand up for what they believe is right in terms of dealing with what's good and bad, and with the moral duties and the obligations is challenging. Nurses educate patients and families about tests and procedures, enabling patients to make decisions freely, maintaining humanity and privacy, maintaining acting in patients' value and belief and the preference, ensuring the concerns are addressed, standards are upheld, and positive outcomes remains the goal for the nurses. So promoting social justice is in the provision of healthcare, such as confronting inappropriate policies or rules in the healthcare systems. For example, socioeconomic status, identifying and correcting inequity in delivery of health service, like recuperative care could be provided, and facilitating access to rich community health service and the health resources, including transportation planning, are great ways to promote advocacy. Okay, and here, that's my part. So Andrew has got a challenge of advocacy.
Thank you, Young. Great job. Yeah, so we're going to talk about the challenges of advocacy. You can go to the next slide. So we're going to first talk about the negative challenges. Some of the big issues that may arise is between the medical staff. So if we are the nurses, we're advocating for our patients, we might be talking to charge nurses or physical therapists, doctors even. And for all of those people, there might be conflict. There might be an issue between whether this person thinks that PT thinks that this type of therapy is better, or they're just stubborn and they don't want to do their job as well. The nurse has to butt in and be like, hey, we actually need to do a little bit more physical therapy for this person because he didn't get enough today. So that can be a buff with a different person of medical staff, which is definitely a big challenge. Another issue that we can have too is if you look at the pictures on the slide, you got the little guy and the big guy. As a nurse, we're not obviously have the highest authority the doctor would. So if we're advocating for a patient, recommending treatment, or even like saying, hey doc, your treatment's not working, we need to work on something else, that can be a source of conflict and an issue. And there might be a fear of conflict and a fear of failure if you don't recommend the right thing to the doc. So he might be like, whoa, this is not good. So that can be a challenge within the community of advocacy. And then also communication with staff. And then another big one is lack of time and the work overload. Nurses as is are already like super worked. We have tons of charting to catch up on, assessments to perform, medications to pass. Other ways is to communicate with staff that takes up so much of our time. So advocacy, unfortunately, falls at the bottom of the list most of the time, just in real life. But one of the challenges that we need to overcome as nurses is implement that and thread it through our daily practice. You can go to the next slide. So I'm just going to dive a little bit further into challenges / obstacles of advocacy. So difficulty moving people to action. Some doctors or nurses, other nurses or other healthcare providers might be complacent in their treatments, and they might have gotten really used to a formula or an algorithm that has worked really well for patients. And then they may not be wanting to change their plan of care for the patient just out of complacency, which is an unfortunate reality. Another one is difficulty in communicating needs. Sometimes it's hard to figure out what the patient actually needs. It's not like we as nurses may know what a problem is with the patient, but we don't know what exactly they need, or we might have a lack of knowledge and we may not know exactly what treatment may most benefit the patient. So that can be another challenge too. And then lastly, not knowing, even if you do have an inkling like, okay, maybe this patient might do well on this medication, you have that fear that you may not be right. You have that knowledge. You're not sure if you're going to be right because either you're a new grad or you're new to the unit. There's just so much knowledge in medicine that you're like, wow, there's just a big jump to figure out what to advocate for. We can go to the next slide. So let's talk about the positive. Basically, what comes of overcoming challenges. The biggest thing is that the fight is worth it. This is why we became nurses, to advocate, to care, to individualize care, to provide support, to show that the patient's voice does matter and that the patient does matter as a person, and that we are here to care for as much of their needs as possible. And that's one of our goals as nurses. And it's one of the main reasons I think all of us became nurses, is to provide that care and to just customize it and to overcome and push through all those challenges to keep moving forward and advocate for our patients. All right, let's go to the last slide. So lastly, I'm just going to provide a couple other pointers on why we advocate. Really good from it. It provides the best quality care. For example, if the patient's been in pain all day long and their Norco has not been working and they've been on Norco for 4 days and they still have a pain 8 out of 10 every day, there's a problem, and that's not quality care. And that can be applied to a lot of different medication regimes and other interventions as well. Sometimes the medication or the treatment does not fit the person, and that's not providing quality care. So figuring out how to best treat the patient and advocate for them does provide quality care. It improves the prognosis as well, patient outcomes, and then shows the nurse that the nurse cares. We kind of talked about that. And then lastly, I already mentioned this as well, but just going to reiterate because it's an important point of it gives the patient a voice, and it feels like the patient is in their plan of care as well, that they're part of the plan of care when they get spoken, and then the nurse takes that knowledge and then applies it to their plan of care and includes the whole healthcare team with their plan of care. So that's it for the challenges of nursing advocacy. We'll go ahead and move on to, I believe it's Veronica.
Thank you, Andrew. Now I will be going over importance of nursing advocacy. So we're going to start off with a quote from Florence Nightingale, in which she states, "Let whoever's in charge keep this simple question in her head. Not how can I always do this right thing myself, but how can I provide for this right thing to be always done?" And from this quote, we can see that nursing engagement and advocacy can be traced back to the founding of modern nursing. Through advocacy work, Florence Nightingale shaped not only nursing, but also improved healthcare, human rights, and the health environment. Next slide. So according to the American Nurses Association, nursing advocacy is the pillar of nursing ethics. Advocacy is explicitly stated in the Nurses Code of Ethics main provision. Explicitly in provision 3, the nurse promotes, advocates for, and protects the rights, health, and safety of the patient. We can also see this in provision 7, which states that nurses have a duty to advance the profession through nursing and health policy, and provision 8, to protect human rights and reduce health disparities. Finally, provision 5 states that we owe the same duties to ourselves to promote health and safety. So as healthcare professionals, we instinctively advocate for our patients, but we should also seek to improve healthcare on a multitude of levels. So these are our nursing advocacy levels. So at the top, nursing advocacy should be engaged at the top levels of government. So we want to help our lawmakers create policies that benefit nursing and healthcare. Right under that is regulatory. So once these policies have been passed, we need regulatory agencies to make sure that they are being followed correctly. So nurses should ensure that the policymakers and regulators understand the role of the nurse and nursing when implementing these laws. Right under that is state. So advocacy at this level includes nursing scope of practice and workplace issues, so such as safe staffing, mandatory overtime, safe patient handling, and workplace violence. Nursing advocacy at the community level includes adequate healthcare resources, community health services, and caring for underserved and vulnerable populations. So within your workplace, nurses have a duty to promote wellness. We also want to reduce stress, prevent burnout, and enhance patient safety. And lastly, we all know about patient advocacy. We want to improve patient care and ensure a patient's needs are being met. So the impact of nursing advocacy. Nursing advocacy, it ensures safety, it provides dignity, and it protects rights for our patients. It also champions social justice, and it influences health policy and global health. So through advocacy, nurses can advance the nursing profession and healthcare. Okay, and that wraps up my section, and we're moving on to Eliana.
Thank you, Veronica. Well, I am going to conclude our presentation. So we started with Michelle, who gave us a definition of advocacy, and then Yang reviewed how to promote advocacy. Andrew went over the pros and cons along with some great and relevant examples. And Veronica just told us the importance of advocacy and the different levels. So as a new grad, sometimes it is really hard for us to adapt into and grow into our role as a new nurse and learn how to practice advocacy. So some basic ways that I believe a new grad could benefit from practicing advocacy is just asking questions when necessary. We always have questions, and sometimes we think that they're dumb questions, but they're not. They're very helpful in helping us advocate for our patients. So it's just, that's, I think one of the biggest ones is to always ask questions on why this, why that, why not this, and why doesn't this work? And even from the experienced nurses on the unit. Team building, I think it's important to trust the team that you work with and to feel confident in asking everyone for help when you need it and not just having a specific person you can go to. Encourage patients to voice their concerns and also include them in their care plan and their treatment plan and their medication regimen. And do they want this med? Do they not? Does this one make them feel a certain way? They really, really appreciate being involved, and that is part of promoting advocacy within your patient. And another one is just being a lifelong learner. As nurses, we are constantly learning new things, and we just need to be open to learning new ways. Next, please. And what the future of advocacy looks like. If I can put it in one word, I would have to say promising. Since the beginning of the profession, when Florence made her discoveries with hygiene and infection control, and up until now, through collective efforts, nurses have changed policies by addressing systemic barriers to optimal patient care and healthy environments through establishment of standards, regulations, and policies. So all of these advances have been successful due to advocacy that the nurses provide day in and day out. And that concludes us.